The day I married Catherine Sterling, the Ice Queen CEO of a multi-billion-dollar private equity firm, I had exactly $350.20 to my name. Outside City Hall, she handed me a sheaf of papers thick enough to stop a bullet and a pen that probably cost more than my last month's rent. "Sign this," she said. Her voice had the same frosty precision as her tailored suit. "It's a prenuptial agreement. During the marriage, I will provide you with housing and a monthly allowance of $50,000. You will not interfere in any of my decisions. You will not publicly claim any relationship to me, and you will not entertain any inappropriate ideas about me." I took the contract, flipped straight to the last page without reading a word, and signed my name, Jake Riley. Catherine's perfectly sculpted eyebrow twitched, a barely perceptible crack in her icy facade. She seemed surprised by my lack of due diligence. "You're not going to read the terms?" "No need," I said, handing back the pen. "We both know this ends in divorce anyway, right?" She looked like she'd never met a gold digger, so thoroughly devoid of ambition. For a moment, she was actually speechless. Then, her composure returned, and she took an envelope from her assistant. "This is your first month's allowance, along with the keys and security card to the house." I took the envelope, felt its reassuring thickness, then pulled out a crisp $20 bill. I walked over to a woman a few feet away who was frantically telling a bus driver that her phone had died and she couldn't pay the fare. "Here you go, ma'am. Get where you're going." She thanked me profusely and boarded the bus. Catherine and her assistant, David Chun, were staring at me. I fanned a remaining stack of cash in the envelope and gave her what I hoped was my most charming, sincere smile. "Pleasure doing business with you, boss." Catherine's face went dark. Without another word, she turned on her heel, slid into the back of a black Bentley, and the car sped away as if my broke-ass energy field was physically contagious. David Chun lingered. He pushed his wire-rimmed glasses up his nose and gave me a look that was part appraisal, part warning. "Mr. Riley, Ms. Sterling is not a patient woman. I hope you understand the importance of discretion. Don't do anything foolish, and especially don't go around using her name to cause trouble. This contract can be terminated at any time." I nodded. "Understood. Your boss provides, I abide. I get the rules of the road." My cheerful compliance seemed to throw him off. He gave me one last, complicated look, then hailed an Uber and was gone. I stood there alone, jingling the heavy keys in my hand and looking at the envelope full of cash. The truth is, I never meant to get tangled up with Catherine Sterling. 3 days earlier, my landlord had kicked me out for refusing his demand to raise my rent by 50%. I was dragging my suitcase through the East Village, trying to decide whether to crash at a 24-hour diner or find a quiet bench in Central Park, when I wandered into a dive bar. And there she was. She was clearly wasted, occupying a corner booth surrounded by an army of empty cocktail glasses. The face that graced the cover of Forbes, the iron-willed titan of Sterling Capital, looked lost and fragile in a way that felt illegal. I recognized her instantly. When a waiter tried to clear her table, she waved him off with a slurred but menacing command. I figure a woman that drunk and that famous was a target, so I walked over. "Hey, you okay? Need me to call you a car?" She lifted her head, and her eyes, a stormy gray, clouded with alcohol, fixed on me. She stared for a long moment, then her hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. Her skin was cold, but her grip was surprisingly strong. You look like him," she slurred, and then she passed out cold. What was I supposed to do? I couldn't just leave her there. I looked through her purse for an emergency contact, but only found an ID and a car key. Left with no other choice, I used a few $100s in cash from her wallet to get a room at a nearby hotel and tucked her into bed. And then I woke up the next morning on a sea of 1,000 thread count sheets, with a shocked and furious Catherine Sterling staring daggers at me from the other side of the bed. The rest of the story is a cliché. She was convinced I was some lowlife who had taken advantage of her. The look in her eyes was a mix of disgust and homicide. I tried to explain, but she wouldn't listen. Just as I was bracing myself for a call to the police, or, more likely, a team of guys in black suits to come make me disappear, her phone rang. I couldn't hear the other side, but it was obviously a tense conversation, someone pressuring her. After she hung up, she stared at me, a desperate, calculating look on her face. A terrible idea was forming behind those beautiful, angry eyes. "What's your name?" Jake Riley. Do you have a job? Not at the moment. Do you need money? Desperately. Good, she said, her voice flat. We're getting married. I thought I was still dreaming. Later, I pieced it together. Her grandfathers will stipulated that she had to be married within the month to secure her controlling shares of the company. Meanwhile, her uncle, a corporate vulture named Arthur Sterling, was circling, waiting for her to fail. Marrying me was a frantic, last-ditch move. A husband with no family, no money, and no connections was the perfect placeholder. I posed no threat to her power, and I'd be easy to control. Once the heat was off, she could cut me loose, and I just happened to be the most convenient candidate. I needed a roof over my head and enough cash to get back on my feet. She needed a husband to put on paper. We were a perfect match made in desperation. And that's how our ridiculous story began. Catherine's house, no, her estate, was in Greenwich, Connecticut, a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the Long Island Sound, nestled in a neighborhood where the security gates alone cost more than my college education. I followed the GPS directions. The two stone lions guarding the driveway looked like they could buy and sell the entire apartment building I'd just been evicted from. Card swipe, PIN code, and I was in. The front door opened into a cavernous living room with 20-foot ceilings. The decor was all chrome, white leather, and stark minimalism. It was just like Catherine herself, exquisitely designed, breathtakingly expensive, and completely devoid of warmth. I walked through the three-story mansion. Aside from the high-end furniture, there was no sign of actual life. The kitchen was so spotless you could perform surgery on the countertops. The Sub-Zero fridge contained only a six-pack of Fiji water and a carton of expired almond milk. This woman, it seemed, didn't so much live here as she did occasionally occupy the space. I found a guest room on the second floor with a view of the Sound. It wasn't huge, but it was a hell of an upgrade from my old studio apartment. Catherine didn't come back for the next few days. I was more than happy to have the place to myself. I slept in late, then used the allowance she'd given me to explore the local farmers markets. Yes, farmers markets. I politely declined David's offer to have all necessary provisions procured and delivered, insisting I'd handle it myself. There was something grounding about it. The smell of fresh basil and damp earth, the sight of glistening fish on ice, the sound of vendors hawking heirloom tomatoes. It made me feel like I was living in the real world again. I used the simplest ingredients to cook for myself. Braised short ribs that fell off the bone. Pan-seared sea bass with a lemon caper sauce. Simple, perfect dishes. I always made more than I could eat, packing the leftovers away in the fridge. A week later, Catherine came home. It was late at night. She stumbled in, reeking of exhaustion and expensive whiskey. She kicked off her heels at the door and collapsed onto the sofa in the dark, not even bothering to turn on a light. I was just coming from the kitchen with a bowl of warm pear and ginger soup. Our eyes met in the darkness. "You?" Her voice was sharp with alarm, as if she'd forgotten a stranger was living in her house. "I live here," I said, placing the bowl on the coffee table in front of her. "Remember?" Silence. She was probably recalling our bizarre contractual arrangement. "What is this?" she asked, nodding at the steaming bowl. "It's good for you. You look like hell." I flicked on a lamp. In the soft light, her makeup was slightly smeared, but it couldn't hide the bone-deep weariness etched onto her face. She was still stunningly beautiful. She glanced from the soup to me, her expression unreadable. "You made this. What do you think? Is there a ghost chef hiding in the pantry?" She didn't say anything else, nor did she touch the soup. She stood up, swaying slightly, and headed for the stairs. At the landing, she paused and looked back at me, her voice cold as steel. "Throw that out. I don't like the smell of food in my house." And she was gone. I looked at the soup I'd spent an hour preparing and shrugged. Whatever. Rich people are weird. I picked up the bowl and drank it all myself. It was delicious. The next morning, Catherine was already gone when I woke up. A note was sitting on the dining room table, her name scrawled in an elegant, aggressive script. "Charity gala tonight. The Apex Club. 8 p.m. Pick me up." An address was scribbled below. I stared at the note, a headache already forming. This meant I had to find something to wear that didn't have a faded band logo on it, and play the part of the respectable. What was I? The trophy husband. I opened my closet. It was a sea of worn-out t-shirts and jeans. Time to put that allowance to good use. I took the black card Catherine had given me and went to the most expensive department store in Manhattan. The price tag on a single suit here could have paid my old rent for a year. I had no idea about brands, so I just picked a simple, well-cut charcoal gray suit that looked understated. At the checkout, the sales associate glanced at the card, then at me, her eyes filled with a polite but unmistakable curiosity. She was clearly trying to figure out how a guy like me ended up with a card like that. "We've included a complimentary set of cufflinks and a tie clip, sir," she said with a practiced, professional smile. I thanked her and walked out with my purchase. At 7:30 that evening, I pulled my beat-up sedan up to the entrance of the Apex Club. A parade of Lamborghinis and Maybachs were pulling up to the valet. Even in my new suit, I felt like a stray dog that had wandered into a purebred dog show. I called Catherine. A minute later, she swept out of the entrance. She wore a floor-length gown the color of blood red wine that made her skin look like porcelain. The moment she appeared, all other activity seemed to stop. She walked straight to me, her eyes raking over my new suit. "Acceptable," she pronounced. Then, she did something that surprised me. She looped her arm through mine. Her touch was light, but I could feel the tension in her body. She was clearly not a person who enjoyed physical contact. "Remember," she murmured, her voice low and close to my ear, "say as little as possible. Smile, and stay close to me." It sounded less like advice and more like a mission briefing. "Roger that," I said. We walked into the ballroom together. Instantly, I felt dozens of eyes lock onto us like heat-seeking missiles. I could practically taste the blend of curiosity, shock, disdain, and glee in the air. I overheard a couple of heiresses whispering nearby. "Is that him? Catherine Sterling's husband? He looks so normal. I heard he's just some random guy she picked up. A gold digger. What was she thinking? Please, everyone's taking bets on when she dumps him. I put 10 grand on 1 month." "A month? You're generous." I took the enter on a week. I kept a pleasant, neutral smile on my face, acting as if I hadn't heard a thing. The arm linked with mine went rigid. I could feel her fingernails digging into my forearm. "Easy," I whispered. "Any tighter, and you're going to draw blood." She flinched and immediately loosened her grip as if she'd been burned. She took a deep breath, recalibrating, and the Ice Queen was back. She plucked a glass of champagne from a passing tray and began to navigate the crowd, with me in tow like a silent, smiling accessory. The host of the party was a silver-haired man with a sharp suit and a kind smile, a Mr. Hayes, one of the old guard patriarchs of the business world. Catherine led me over to greet him. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice laced with a rare note of genuine respect. He beamed at her, then his eyes landed on me. "Catherine, my dear, and who is this?" "This is Jake Riley," she said, a slight hesitation before the next words. "My husband." "Oh." A flicker of surprise crossed Mr. Hayes's face, but he quickly covered it with a warm smile. "Wonderful. A fine-looking young man." He clapped me on the shoulder. "You'll have to take good care of our Kate. She's been a firecracker since she was a little girl, always too tough for her own good." "I'll do my best, sir," I said. Just then, a slimy voice cut through the pleasantries. Well, if it isn't my favorite niece. Got married, did we?" And here I was waiting for my invitation. A bloated man in his 50s with a shiny suit and a much younger woman dripping in jewels sidled up to us. Arthur Sterling, Catherine's uncle, and, from what I gathered, her biggest corporate rival. The warmth instantly vanished from Catherine's eyes, replaced by Arctic frost. "Uncle Arthur, my personal life is none of your concern." He let out a wheezy chuckle, his eyes shamelessly sizing me up like a piece of meat at a butcher's shop. "So this is the lucky man? And what is it you do, son? Where are you employed?" It was a loaded question, designed to humiliate. Everyone in this room knew the rumors. He wanted to force me to admit it in public. Catherine's expression soured. Before she could intervene, I smiled pleasantly and answered for myself. "Oh, I'm not employed anywhere. I'm a freeloader. My wife supports me completely." I said it with the casual, unapologetic air of someone announcing they worked in marketing. The entire conversation circle went dead silent. Everyone stared at me as if I'd just grown a second head. They'd probably never seen someone so cheerfully admit to being a kept man. Arthur was stunned. I could see he had a whole arsenal of follow-up insults ready to go, and I just disarmed him with a single, shameless sentence. His face turned a blotchy red. Heh, well, he finally sputtered. At least you're honest. No point in being modest when you've got nothing to be modest about, I said, still smiling. I heard someone behind me choke back a laugh. Arthur's face was now the color of a ripe plum. The woman on his arm, apparently trying to salvage the situation, piped up in a saccharine voice. Oh, Jake, you're such a kidder. But a man really should have his own career. Not like my Arthur. He works so hard for the company, he barely has time to breathe. I worry about him constantly. As she spoke, she gestured dramatically, flashing a diamond watch so large it could have been used as a ship's anchor. My eyes followed her hand, and I let out a small, thoughtful sound. Huh, what is it? She asked, preening. That watch. I don't think it's keeping the right time. She froze. What? That's impossible. This is a limited edition Patek Philippe. Arthur just brought it back from Switzerland for me. Is that so? I leaned in, pretending to inspect it. Because as I recall, the tourbillon on this particular model has a fixed rotation speed. Yours seems to be running just a fraction of a second too fast. You wouldn't notice it now, but over a few months, the inaccuracy would really add up. I said it with the deadpan authority of an expert. The color drained from both her and Arthur's faces. The people around us started to lean in, intrigued. You don't know what you're talking about. What do you know about watches? The woman stammered, her confidence evaporating. I don't know much about wearing them, I admitted freely, but I'm sensitive to mechanical precision. Occupational hazard. Occupational hazard. Arthur sneered, sensing an opening. I thought you were unemployed. Oh, I used to repair antique clocks, I lied smoothly. In reality, I know nothing about clock repair. I only knew that watch was a fake because I'd read an article about it in a gourmet food magazine. The editor was a watch aficionado and had written a long, detailed piece on this specific model's movement, complaining about the incredibly sophisticated knockoffs that were flooding the market. This woman's watch was a perfect example of the super clone he'd described. A fake so good only a top-tier expert could spot the minuscule flaw in its timing. And now, here it was on the wrist of my new arch-nemesis's girlfriend. My little observation had sucked all the air out of the room. Mr. Hayes, ever the diplomat, stepped in to break the tension. All right, that's enough. Arthur, leave the boy alone. Don't bully the newlyweds. Arthur Sterling, face burning with humiliation, grabbed his companion's arm and stormed off, but not before shooting me a look of pure venom. I knew, right then, that I had made a serious enemy. Once the storm had passed, Catherine pulled me into a quiet, empty alcove. She was looking at me in a way she never had before. It was more than just assessment. There was genuine curiosity in her eyes. Do you really know how to repair clocks? I dabble, I said, keeping my face perfectly straight. She was silent for a moment, then asked, why did you do that? Do what? Help you. I paused and grinned. I wasn't helping you. I was helping me. Your uncle tries to humiliate me, which in turn humiliates you. If you get humiliated, you get angry, and if you get angry, you might just cut off my allowance. I was protecting my income stream. I laid out the logic clean and mercenary. Catherine's expression immediately reverted to its default setting. Ice. I see. You've certainly thought it through. She turned and walked back into the party, leaving me alone. I watched her go, rubbing my nose. For some reason, I got the distinct feeling that my perfectly logical explanation had made her angry. The main event of the evening was a charity auction. The items were all donated by the city's elite, with the proceeds going to an education fund for underprivileged kids. Catherine, representing Sterling Capital, had donated a painting by some famous artist. The bidding was lively. Catherine raised her paddle a few times for show. I wasn't interested in any of it. My attention was focused on the trays of tiny, exquisite desserts. They were mostly terrible, cloyingly sweet, with greasy buttercream. As I was mentally cataloging the failures of the pastry chef, a strange item was brought to the stage. It was a set of old, worn-looking kitchen tools, a few knives of different sizes, a heavy-looking cast-iron wok, and a dark wooden cutting board. The bidding started at $10,000. Next to all the glittering jewelry and exotic vacations, the humble kitchen set looked completely out of place. The auctioneer explained that it was an heirloom from Mr. Hayes's family, saying his great-grandfather had been a chef for the Rockefellers during the Gilded Age. A low murmur went through the crowd. Why would he auction that off? Who's going to pay for a bunch of old pots and pans? The room went quiet. To save Mr. Hayes from embarrassment, someone placed a token bid. 15,000. 20. The price crawled upwards reluctantly. Suddenly, Catherine nudged me. Go on. Buy it, she whispered. What? I was stunned. We have to show respect to Mr. Hayes, she explained, her logic cold and quick. But if Sterling Capital buys a set of old cookware, it'll look ridiculous. If you buy it in your personal capacity, it fits your domestic persona. I understood. I was being deployed as a tool again. Fine. I raised my paddle. $100,000. My voice cut through the quiet bidding. Once again, every eye in the room swiveled to me. From across the room, I heard Arthur Sterling let out a loud, contemptuous snort. Figures. A man with no class has no taste. I ignored him. One of Arthur's sycophants raised his paddle. 110,000. So that was their game. They were going to make this as painful as possible. 200,000, I said, raising my paddle again. 210. 500,000. I was done playing their game. A collective gasp went through the room. $500,000 for a pile of rust and wood? They all thought I was insane. Even Catherine frowned, leaning in to hiss in my ear. Jake, what are you doing? This is just for show. I know, I said quietly, but your uncle is challenging you. If we back down now, you lose face, not me. Catherine fell silent. Arthur's table was clearly shocked by my escalation. He hesitated, then, driven by pride, had his man raise the paddle one more time. 510,000, he shouted, his voice strained. 1 million, I said, my voice calm and even. This time, Catherine herself sucked in a sharp breath. She grabbed my arm. Jake, are you crazy? It's just a set of kitchen tools. Trust me, I said, giving her a reassuring look. Arthur's face was turning a shade of purple I'd never seen before. $1 million wasn't a huge sum for him, but spending it on this junk would make him the laughingstock of their entire social circle. He shot me a murderous glare and finally, grudgingly, lowered his paddle. 1 million going once, twice, 3 times. Sold. The gavel fell. I had successfully purchased a set of old kitchen tools for the price of a luxury apartment. In that moment, I became the center of attention and the butt of every joke. Is that gold digger an idiot? $1 million for a frying pan? Look at Catherine's face. She's going to kill him. This is better than reality TV. I'll bet you anything he's out on the street by morning. I could feel Catherine's hand on my arm, now as cold and hard as a block of iron. I knew she was furious. The ride back to Greenwich was thick with a silence, so heavy it felt like it had its own gravity. Jake, Catherine finally said, her voice completely devoid of warmth. Do you get some kind of sick thrill from wasting my money? It's not your money, I said. You gave me the card. It's my money now. Catherine was silent. I think my flawless logic might have actually short-circuited her brain. Fine. Wonderful, she finally seethed. $1 million for a pile of scrap metal. You managed to set a new record for stupid. It's not scrap metal, I said quietly, watching the city lights streak past the window. Oh, really? What is it then? Solid gold. Her sarcasm was practically dripping from the ceiling. Those knives, I began, were hand-forged in the 1920s by a master craftsman named Elias Thorne. He only ever made 3 sets. One is in the Smithsonian, one was lost to history, and the third, apparently, belonged to Mr. Hayes. That wok was forged from a single piece of meteorite iron by a workshop that's been defunct for 80 years. It conducts heat almost instantly and perfectly evenly. The technique is lost now. And the cutting board, it's the heartwood of a curly maple tree, cured in tung oil for 49 days, then air-dried for another 81. It's self-healing, won't dull a knife, and gives off a faint, sweet scent when you cut on it. I rattled off the details from memory. This knowledge all came from my mentor, an old man who was a fanatical purist about every aspect of food and cooking. He taught me how to cook, but he also taught me these useless skills, how to recognize the soul of the tools. Catherine listened, her angry silence slowly transforming into a stunned one. The atmosphere in the car shifted. How do you know all that? She asked. Like I said, I replied, sticking to my story. Occupational hazard. She didn't press further, just turned her head to look out the window, lost in thought. When we got back to the house, She went upstairs without a word. I took my $1 million kitchen tools and carefully began the process of cleaning, sharpening, and re-seasoning them. As I worked, their original, beautiful luster began to emerge from beneath the decades of neglect. I smiled to myself. That was $1 million well spent. The next day, as I was experimenting with my new treasures, David Chin showed up. He brought some astonishing news. At the gala last night, a 3-star Michelin chef from Paris had approached him, offering $5 million for the kitchen set I'd bought. I told David to tell him no. Undeterred, the chef had contacted Catherine directly, upping his offer to $10 million. Catherine had told him it was my decision to make. The story spread like wildfire through their social circle. Suddenly, Jake Riley, the moron who'd been laughed out of the Apex Club, had become a mysterious connoisseur with a golden eye. The same heiresses who had been betting on my imminent expulsion were now looking at me with a new, speculative respect. Oh my God, he actually knew. He turned $1 million into $10 million overnight. His instincts are insane. Wait, what if he's not a gold digger? What if he's one of those eccentric, undercover billionaires? The narrative had completely flipped, and the man at the center of it all was standing in the kitchen, wearing an apron, having a silent standoff with a sea base. When Catherine got home from work, I was just putting the last dish on the table. A full spread. For courses, 2 meat, 2 vegetable, a feast for the eyes and the nose. She stopped in the doorway and stared at the table. You made all this? What do you think? I asked, taking off my apron and setting a plate for her. She hesitated, then sat down. She picked up her fork and took a small, tentative bite of the short rib. And then she froze. For the first time since I'd met her, an emotion other than anger or exhaustion crossed her face. It was pure, unadulterated shock. This is not good, I asked. She didn't answer. She took a bite of the sea base. Then she tried the soup. She ate the entire meal in an unnerving silence. But when she was done, her plate was clean. It was the first time she had ever eaten a meal in this house. After dinner, she sat on the sofa, watching me do the dishes, a complex look in her eyes. That French chef called me again, she said. Oh yeah, I replied, scrubbing the wok. He raised his offer to $15 million. Not for sale. Why not? They feel good in my hands, I said, as if it were the most obvious reason in the world. Catherine was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, almost strained. Jake, who are you, really? I dried the last plate, put it away, and turned to face her, leaning back against the counter. I'm your legally wedded husband, I said with a grin. An unemployed man of leisure, living off the generosity of his wife. She just stared at me, the confusion and suspicion in her eyes deepening. I knew that, in her mind, my identity had just become a puzzle, and I was enjoying the hell out of it. That meal changed something between us. She started coming home for dinner. She never said a word about the food, but I knew she loved it. Whenever I tried a new dish, she always had a second helping. Her words were still few and far between, but she no longer seemed to be covered in invisible armor. One night, she came home late, looking utterly defeated. I made her a simple bowl of chicken noodle soup from scratch, with a perfect soft-boiled egg and fresh herbs. She ate it in silence, and when she was done, she looked at me and said, "Thank you." I was almost touched. "Don't mention it," I said. "I'll deduct the cost of ingredients from the allowance." The slight warmth that had entered her face instantly vanished. I swear, sometimes I think I have a genuine talent for ruining a moment. The following Saturday, I was up early, tending to a small herb garden I'd started on the patio. For once, Catherine was home and not working. She was sitting on the balcony in a cashmere sweatsuit, sipping coffee and reading over some documents. The morning sun softened the sharp lines of her face, making her look less like a CEO and more like a normal person. There is a strange harmony to it, her upstairs, me downstairs, coexisting in our own quiet orbits. Then the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a woman in her late 50s, dressed head to toe in designer clothes, with an expression that looked like she'd just smelled something bad. A younger, timid-looking girl stood behind her. "You must be Jake," the woman said, her eyes sweeping over me with blatant disapproval. "I am. And you are." "I'm Catherine's mother, Eleanor Sterling." My stomach dropped. The mother-in-law. And she did not look happy to be here. Eleanor brushed past me as if I were a piece of furniture, and stormed into the living room. She spotted Catherine on the balcony, and her face tightened into a scowl. "Catherine, what is the meaning of this? You don't even have the decency to visit on the weekend, and I find you shacked up with this person." Her voice was sharp and loud. Catherine set down her papers and came downstairs, her expression instantly reverting to its familiar icy mask. "Mother, what are you doing here?" "I'm here because you're embarrassing this family." "Is this him? Is this the man you married? An unemployed nobody? Have you lost your mind?" She pointed a finger at me. "My life is not your concern." "Not my concern? I am your mother. I'm telling you, you will divorce this man immediately and get engaged to William Davenport." Eleanor gestured to the girl behind her. "This is William's fiancée, Annabelle. She came here today to see for herself just what kind of woman stole her husband to be." The pieces clicked into place. Annabelle was the fiancée of the man Catherine was supposed to marry. This was a public shaming. Annabelle just stared at the floor, looking mortified. "Mother, I told you. I will make my own decisions about my marriage," Catherine said, her voice dangerously low. "You'll make your own decisions? This is your decision? What can he possibly give you? Can he help you at the company? What can he do besides spend your money?" Eleanor's tirade was focused entirely on me. I stayed silent, letting her vent. When she finally paused to take a breath, I spoke in a calm, even voice. "Mrs. Sterling, are you finished? If you are, would you care for some tea? I've just brewed a single estate Darjeeling, steeped at 180 degrees for 3 minutes. It's really quite excellent." I gestured to the teapot on the coffee table. Eleanor's face flushed a deep, angry red. My calm demeanor was, I suspected, more infuriating to her than any argument I could have made. You, she was sputtering. "Mother." Catherine stepped between us. "If you're going to continue this, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Fine. Choose this man over your own mother." Eleanor shrieked. "I'm telling you right now, Catherine, it's him or me." With that, she grabbed Annabelle and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The drama was over as quickly as it had begun. The house was quiet again. Catherine and I stood there in the silent living room. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "My mother is like that." "It's fine," I shrugged. "Honestly, she's got less fight in her than I expected." She looked at me, her expression unreadable. "You're not angry?" "Angry about what? That she called me a gold digger?" I laughed. "She's not wrong. I don't have a job, and I'm spending your money. What's there to be angry about?" Catherine fell silent again. My complete lack of shame always seemed to short-circuit her. "Jake," she said suddenly. "Thank you." This time, I didn't make a sarcastic comment. I looked at her and said, "Seriously, don't mention it. For better or worse, we're in the same boat now." She stared at me, and then for the very first time, the corner of her mouth tilted up in a tiny, almost imperceptible smile. It was gone in a flash, but I saw it. My mother-in-law's surprise attack, like a stone tossed into a still pond, had sent ripples through the calm surface of our arrangement. After that day, Catherine started coming home earlier. Sometimes she'd even bring work home, tapping away at her laptop on the sofa while I watched documentaries about competitive barbecue on the other side of the room. We rarely spoke, but the silence was comfortable, peaceful even. David Chun started coming by more often, too. Every time he saw me, his eyes held a strange mixture of awe and pity. The awe was for my various, seemingly random skills. The pity was because he thought my life as a trophy husband was a living hell. He'd seen Catherine coldly sentence me to a week of dish duty because I'd accidentally shuffled the pages of an important report she was reading. He didn't know I'd done it on purpose because I'd spotted a fatal flaw in her data, and knew her pride wouldn't let her accept a direct correction. I had to create a scenario where she would be forced to reread it herself. Sure enough, she found the mistake, avoiding a disastrous investment. She never mentioned it, but she had a second helping of dinner that night. He'd also been there when Catherine had furiously ripped into a potential business partner on the phone, the temperature in the house dropping 20 degrees after she'd hung up. All I did was quietly hand her a glass of warm water and turn down the volume on the TV. He didn't know that the partner was a setup from her uncle, Arthur. I gotten a tip from a friend in the restaurant world that the company was a shell corporation designed to defraud investors. I'd forgotten the printout of my friend's research on her desk that morning. All David saw was Catherine's coldness and my quiet subservience. He thought I was a battered spouse. So every time he visited, he'd secretly press treats into my hand. Imported chocolates, limited edition cookies. Mr. Riley, you're a saint. This is the least I can do, he'd say with a mournful expression. I look at the snacks, try not to laugh. David, I think you might be misreading the situation. No, not at all, he'd insist, shoving the contraband into my pocket. I understand completely. You're enduring all this for Miss Sterling Sake, a true hero. Your secret is safe with me. Watching him walk away, I'd shake my head. The fanfiction this guy was writing in his head had to be epic. And so, our strange relationship continued to evolve in its own weird way. We developed a silent, secret language. If I left a mint next to her morning espresso, it meant I'd heard a rumor about a deal she was working on, and she should be careful. If she came home and left her briefcase on the left side of the entryway table, it meant things at the office were fine. If she left on the right, it meant she'd run into trouble. We were like two Cold War spies communicating in code, running a covert operation from inside our own marriage. To the outside world, we were just a bizarre, mismatched couple. The betting pool on our marriage was still active. The 1-month bet had cost the bookies a fortune. Now a new one had started. How long until the divorce? The odds were highest on within a year. When David told me about it, I was watering the tomato plants I planted on the patio. Don't let it get to you, Mr. Riley, David said, trying to be encouraging. They're just jealous. I just smiled. All I was thinking was that when the tomatoes were ripe, I'd make a killer tomato soup with grilled cheese, and Catherine would probably love it. The calm was shattered by a sudden crisis. A major overseas acquisition that Sterling Capital had been working on for months was hijacked at the last minute by a rival firm. A rival firm, it turned out, that was secretly being backed by Arthur Sterling. The news broke while Catherine and I were having dinner. She took the call, and I watched the color drain from her face. She said nothing, just put down her fork and walked into her study. The light in her office stayed on all night. The next morning, she was already gone. Her breakfast was untouched on the table. This was bad. My phone rang. It was David, his voice frantic. Mr. Riley, it's a catastrophe. The deal fell through, the company's stock is plummeting, and the board. Arthur has rallied several board members. They're calling for an emergency meeting to remove Kate as CEO. Understand, I said calmly. Is there anything you can do? In his desperation, David had apparently promoted me from battered spouse to miracle worker. Let me make a call. I hung up and sat on the sofa, staring out at the garden. This was Arthur's endgame. He was trying to rip the company out from under her. Catherine was brilliant, but she was young, and she didn't have a deep bench of allies on the board. I had to help her. I scrolled through my contacts to a number I hadn't called in years. It rang once, then a sleepy, annoyed voice answered. Yeah? Who's this? Do you have any idea what time it is? Sully, it's me. Holy crap. Jake? Man, where have you been? I thought you got abducted by aliens. The voice on the other end was suddenly wide awake and thrilled. Sully, my oldest friend and one of the most talented computer hackers on the planet. Cut the crap. I need a favor. Name it. You know I'd do anything for you. I need you to look into a person and a company. I gave him Arthur Sterling's name and the name of the rival firm. That's it. Child's play. Give me half an hour. 30 minutes later, an email landed in my inbox. It was a file containing a terrifyingly detailed dossier. It had everything: bank records, emails, phone logs proving the collusion between Arthur and the other firm. It even had a secret audio recording of Arthur at a steakhouse, bragging to a friend about how he was going to destroy his niece. I looked at the file and smiled. Sully always delivered. Dude, this Arthur guy is a real piece of work, Sully said when I called him back. Want me to leak his browser history? It's illuminating. No, I said. This will be enough. No need for overkill. All right, man. Hey, when are you coming back? The guys are barely keeping the restaurant afloat without you. The regulars are getting restless. The restaurant, my mentor's legacy, a tiny, hole-in-the-wall place that served the best food in the city. Soon, I said. I hung up and forwarded the file to David's email with a simple instruction. Send this to every board member. Anonymously. With that done, I went into the kitchen and started prepping dinner. Tonight, we were going to celebrate. Catherine came home late, looking even more exhausted than the night before. her eyes red-rimmed and bloodshot. She saw me, then she saw the elaborate meal spread on the table, and she stopped. "You, dinner's ready," I said, pulling out her chair. I ladled a rich chicken soup in her bowl. She looked at me, her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. She just sat down and started eating the soup, one spoonful after another. I knew she must have been through hell today. "How was the board meeting?" I asked. She set down her spoon and looked at me. Her eyes were weary, but there was a flicker of triumphant fire in them. "Arthur Sterling was arrested." "Oh." Someone leaked evidence of his embezzlement and corporate espionage to the entire board and to the SEC. She never took her eyes off my face. "Wow, guess karma's real after all," I said, casually placing a piece of perfectly roasted chicken on her plate. "Jake," she said, her voice sharp. "It was you, wasn't it?" "Me?" I gave her my most innocent look. "I'm just the guy who makes dinner. I don't have that kind of power." "I can't think of anyone else," she said, her tone certain. "You're not just a cook, and you're not a clock repairman. Who are you?" This was the question she kept coming back to. This time, I knew I couldn't dodge it. I sighed and put down my fork. "All right, you got me. Time to come clean." Catherine sat up straighter, her expression deadly serious, like a judge waiting for a confession. I cleared my throat and began in a low, dramatic voice. "The truth is, I am the last descendant of a forgotten, noble family. Our fortune was vast, our power unrivaled, until a shocking betrayal brought our dynasty crashing down. I alone survived, and I have lived in the shadows, honing my skills, waiting for the day when I can reclaim my birthright and avenge my family." I thought it was a pretty compelling performance. Catherine stared at me, her face a complete blank. She was silent for a full 30 seconds. Then, she picked up her fork, speared the piece of chicken I'd given her, and put it in her mouth. "Okay," she said, chewing thoughtfully. "Well, good luck with that." I just stared at her. This was a tough crowd. The rest of the meal passed in a strange, tense silence. After dinner, she didn't retreat to her study. She sat on the sofa and watched me clear the table. "Jake," she said again. "Yeah. Thank you. You're welcome. The acquisition deal that Arthur sabotaged. It's dead, but a better one came along." "That's great. Congratulations. The head of a new firm wants to meet with our company's mysterious consultant." "Mysterious consultant?" I paused. "Who's that?" "The person with the golden eye who can spot a $10 million treasure at a charity auction," she said, watching me. "And who, at a critical moment, can produce the exact evidence needed to take down a corporate rival and send him to prison." The plate in my hand almost slipped. "He wants to meet me?" "Yes. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, at the office." "I'm not going," I said immediately. "You have to," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "This deal is critical. And what am I supposed to say? That my real job is making you dinner. You can tell him your story about being a fallen noble," she said, her face completely straight. I was beginning to feel like I had dug myself into a very, very deep hole. The next day, Catherine practically hog-tied me and dragged me to her office. It was my first time at Sterling Capital. The entire skyscraper was theirs. Her office was on the top floor, a corner suite with a panoramic view of the city that could make a king feel small. She parked me in a small lounge attached to her office while she went to a meeting. Left to my own devices, I started to explore. Her office was like her home. Minimalist, organized, and immaculate. The shelves were lined with intimidating books on finance and economics. On the bottom shelf, tucked away behind a stack of journals, was a picture frame, lying face down. Curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up and turned it over. It was a photo of a young man, maybe in his early 20s, with a blindingly brilliant smile. He was wearing a leather racing suit and leaning against a motorcycle. His eyes, his smile, the line of his jaw. He looked almost exactly like me. I froze. Just then, the office door opened and Catherine walked in. She saw the frame in my hand, and her face turned to stone. She strode across the room, snatched it from me, and slammed it face down on the shelf. "Who gave you permission to touch my things?" Her voice was colder than I had ever heard it. It wasn't just angry, it was wounded. I was just. "Get out." She pointed to the door, her voice trembling with a barely suppressed emotion. For the first time, I saw something other than ice or exhaustion on her face. It was grief. A raw, bottomless grief. I didn't argue. I just turned and walked out of the office. As the door clicked shut behind me, I thought I heard a small, choked sob. My heart gave a painful twist. Who was that young man? Why was his picture hidden away, and why? Why did he look so much like me? 1,000 questions swirled in my head. I sat in the reception area for a long time. David brought me a cup of coffee. Mr. Riley, please don't take it personally. Ms. Sterling, she didn't mean it, he said quietly. David, I asked, looking him straight in the eye. Who was the guy in the picture? His face paled, and he looked away. Mr. Riley, that's a private matter. He was my brother. The cool, quiet voice came from behind me. I turned. Catherine was standing there. Her eyes were red and swollen, but she had regained her composure. She walked over and sat down in the chair across from me. His name was Kevin, she said, her voice flat, as if she were reciting facts from a report. My twin brother. He died 3 years ago. A motorcycle accident. She spoke without emotion, but I could feel the lifetime of pain packed into that single sentence. You look a lot like him, she continued, not looking at me. The first time I saw you in that bar. For a second, I thought I was seeing a ghost. And then I understood everything. Why she had grabbed my wrist and said, you look like him. Why she had chosen a complete stranger, a down-on-his-luck nobody, to be her husband. From the very beginning, I had been a stand-in, a substitute, a ghost. The realization hit me like a physical blow, a wave of ice water that washed over me, chilling me to the bone. All of our moments, all of that quiet chemistry I thought we were building, it was all a projection, a fantasy. She wasn't seeing me. She was seeing him. So I said, my voice hoarse, everything, all of this. It was because of him. Catherine looked at me, her gray eyes unreadable. She didn't have to answer. Her silence was answer enough. The client is here, she said, abruptly changing the subject. Get yourself ready. She stood up, once again the untouchable CEO of Sterling Capital. The vulnerable, grieving woman from a moment ago was gone, locked away again. I sat there, frozen, a hollow feeling spreading through my chest. It turned out I was the biggest fool of them all. The client was a charming Frenchman named Pierre, impeccably dressed and radiating an infectious energy. The moment he saw me, his eyes lit up. Mon Dieu, it is you, he exclaimed, rushing forward to embrace me. I instinctively stepped back. He didn't seem offended, instead grabbing my hand and shaking it vigorously. It is an honor. I have been searching for you for years, Mr. Nobody. Mr. Nobody. I was confused. Catherine and David looked just as baffled. Mr. Nobody was the name of a legendary, anonymous chef and food critic, a ghost in the culinary world. It was said his cooking was a religious experience, that he could identify any ingredient in a dish by scent alone. He never showed his face, never gave interviews. Countless billionaires and Michelin-starred restaurants had tried to hire him, but he'd remained a myth. Catherine had been trying to launch a new high-end restaurant division for Sterling Capital. Her holy grail, the one thing she believed would guarantee its success, was finding and hiring Mr. Nobody as a consultant. And she never dreamed that the man she'd been hunting for was sleeping in her guest room. You're Mr. Nobody, David stammered, his glasses nearly falling off his face. I looked at Pierre, then at Catherine's stunned face. I decided to play dumb. You must have me mistaken for someone else, I said. Impossible, Pierre insisted, his voice booming. 3 years ago, at a private dinner in Rome, I had the honor of tasting a single dish you prepared, a consommé so pure, so flavorful, it changed my life. I will never forget that taste. And just now, in the elevator, I caught a scent from your coffee, a single-origin Jamaican Blue Mountain bean, roasted in a very specific way. It is the exact same coffee you served that night. I cursed internally. I'd forgotten about the superhuman senses of a true gourmet. And Pierre continued, pointing dramatically at my hands. Look at your hands. The long fingers, the strong knuckles, the perfectly clean, short nails. They are the hands of a master chef. I would recognize them anywhere. I looked down at my own hands. Was this guy for real? Catherine's gaze followed his, landing on my hands. I watched her expression shift, from shock to disbelief to a dawning, horrified realization. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was thinking about the million-dollar kitchen tools, the meals I'd cooked that had left her speechless, all the useless knowledge about food I possessed. All the pieces were slotting into place. The truth was out. She stared at me. I stared back at her. The air between us crackled with unspoken words. "All right," I sighed, finally giving up. "It's me." David made a choking sound and looked like he was about to faint. Catherine swayed slightly on her feet. Her face was a storm of conflicting emotions: shock, anger, betrayal, and something else I couldn't quite decipher. She must have felt like the biggest idiot in the world. She thought she'd hired a pawn, a convenient ghost to fill a void. Instead, she'd unknowingly captured the one prize she'd been seeking, and had been treating him like her personal chef and errand boy. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Pierre, oblivious to the drama unfolding, launched into an excited monologue about his project, pulling me into a conversation I barely registered. My eyes kept darting back to Catherine. She just stood there, silent and pale, her world completely upended. The thin, fragile foundation of our sham marriage had just been obliterated, and I had no idea what would be left in its place. After Pierre left, Catherine walked back to her office without a word, leaving me in the conference room. I knew she was waiting for me. I knew I owed her an explanation. I found her standing at the floor-to-ceiling window, her back to me, staring down at the city below. "You were lying to me from the very beginning," she said. Her voice was quiet, but each word landed like a hammer blow. "No, I wasn't," I said. "I never told you who I was, but I never told you I wasn't either. You and everyone else just made assumptions. So you just stood by and watched? Watched me treat you like some charity case, like an idiot, all while you were laughing at me." Her voice trembled with rage and hurt. "I was never laughing at you." I walked over and stood beside her at the window. I was just tired. I just wanted a normal life for a while. And so I told her everything. About my family, about growing up in a world where food was a religion, about the relentless pressure of my talent. I told her how I'd gotten sick of the fame, sick of being pursued, sick of a life where I cooked for everyone but could never just enjoy a simple meal myself. So I ran away. I just wanted to be a nobody. Meeting her was an accident. Marrying her was a fluke. But living in her house, cooking in her kitchen, watching her eat the food I made, that was the most real and satisfying thing I'd done in years. I admit, at first, I was just staying for the free room and bored, I said, looking at her profile. But then, I discovered that I really liked cooking for you. You have a way of eating that makes the food seem important. I saw a muscle in her jaw twitch. "As for your brother," I paused. "I'm sorry for your loss. But I'm not him. I'm Jake." She was silent for a long, long time. Just when I thought she wasn't going to speak at all, she asked a question that caught me completely off guard. "Does our contract still stand?" "What contract?" "Our prenuptial agreement." I stared at her for a second. Then a real, genuine laugh escaped me. "That thing? I think it's propping up a wobbly leg on the kitchen table." She turned her head and finally looked at me. In her cold, gray eyes, I saw something new. Something was melting. "Jake," she said, "I'm hungry. What do you want to eat?" "Whatever you make." Looking at her then, I realized that this infuriating, complicated woman wasn't so bad after all. We drove home together. On the way, I got a call from David. He sounded like he was in a state of shock. He told me that the betting pool on when we would get a divorce had officially collapsed. The bookie had just packed up and disappeared. Apparently, he'd left a note. It said, "I'm out. I can't tell who's playing who anymore with these two. They're both insane." I hung up the phone and glanced at Catherine. She was leaning against the window, watching the world go by, and on her lips was the faintest hint of a smile. The sunlight was streaming through the glass, and it made her look warm. Maybe I thought this ridiculous marriage could actually work. At least I knew someone would be waiting for me to come home and cook dinner. Epilogue 6 months later, in the top-floor office of Sterling Capital. Catherine was staring at the latest quarterly report, frowning. The new culinary division, under the guidance of the mysterious Mr. Nobody, was an explosive success, with profits that were frankly obscene. But she wasn't happy. Jake had recently taken up fishing, and he hadn't been home to cook in 3 days. She picked up her phone and dialed his number. "Jake, when are you coming home?" On my way, he said, his voice sounding suspiciously breezy. I saw your Instagram story, Catherine said coolly. Are you in the Maldives? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Well, you see, the group are here. The texture is just much more firm. You have 1 hour, Catherine interrupted, to appear in front of me. If you don't, I will leak to the press that the great Mr. Nobody is, in fact, my trophy husband. A howl of despair echoed down the line. Catherine hung up, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. She was just now discovering the pure, unadulterated joy of blackmail, especially when it was against the person you loved.